I am back for another episode of the Beginner to Master Speedrun. It's been over 2 weeks since I last posted episode 53, but this is going to be episode 54. I have not found the time to shave, so this will be a bearded episode. And coming into today, I am rated just over 1900 at 1905 on a win streak of 165 games. So let's try and keep it going. Yeah, the opponents will be getting tougher. So I want to make sure that I'm managing my time, staying focused, being tactically alert. And let's hop into the first game. Okay, first opponent playing James Von Raj. Let's play Sicilian. And we have an Alapin Sicilian. I'm going to play d5. This is a move that I've mainly played over the years against Alapin. The idea is that white can't develop the knight to c3 because the pawn is committed to c3. So the knight develops to a3, which does look weird, but it is a common idea in the Alapin. Sometimes white wants to go here and then here to fork. I think for now I just develop, and if white plays knight b5, then the queen can always drop back and defend. We see knight to f3. I'm going to play pawn e6. This does block in the bishop, but very often the bishop will fianchetto. Bishop c4. This is another benefit of white having the knight on a3. So I'm going to drop back all the way to d8. I know it looks kind of weird to bring out the queen and then move it all the way back, but I just want to be solid. Just want to play bishop e7 and castle, and then eventually develop the queen side. Yeah, we'll start with bishop e7. And white has kind of put the knight on this weird square in a3, so I think white's going to have to figure out what to do with it later on. With pawn d4, actually debating whether to take or to castle immediately. Kind of tempted to castle, because if takes, I take back with bishop. That should be okay. Yeah, let's castle. There might be ideas for black of playing like a6 and b5, expand, and then eventually fianchettoing. Bishop f4. White is fully developed with the minor pieces. I still have some developing to do. I think it's mainly a question, do I want to play a6 first or b6 first? b6 does aim to develop a bit more quickly, but a6 is a bit more ambitious to try and get in this move, pawn b5. Let's go for a6. So if I get in b5, it comes with tempo. The bishop can then find a happy place. Yeah, b5 looks pretty good. And I think the ideal setup is to put the bishop here, and then knight d7 and queen b6. It still takes a couple moves. I do eventually want to get my rooks in, probably rook c8 and rook d8. White takes on c5, so yeah, I think I have to take back. I mean, ideally I'd like to play knight d7 and take, but if I play knight d7, there's pawn b4. So I'll take with bishop. Then maybe the queen can come to e7. Now white's playing pretty quickly, so I do have to watch the clock. Knight d7 looks pretty solid here. Just reinforcing f6. And I've actually achieved like decent harmony with the pieces. Bishops are really nicely placed, aiming towards white's king side. I'm actually wondering if I have tactics here. Like bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, and then knight e5. Appears to be winning a piece. And if bishop takes f3, pawn takes f3, I mean, I do concede the bishop pair, but white's structure is pretty damaged on the king side. Yeah, usually you don't want to take the knight without like very good reason, but I think it's justified here. Like the alternative is maybe something like h6. But if white has to double the pawns, then yeah, let's go for this. I mean, it does get very imbalanced if white does take back with the pawn. And I think my opponent is at a high enough level to realize the danger. Yeah, queen takes 95. So yeah, now it's a question, like, how do I exploit this king side? White wants to play this and this. Maybe should have thought, like, a bit more ahead of a follow-up. I'm thinking queen c7 to maybe set up bishop d6. Also unpinning the knight. Let's go for this. Multi-purpose move. I might just want to transfer the queen to c6, especially if white plays king h1, a line on the long diagonal. We see knight d4. I mean, now I could take and give white an isolated queen's pawn. Then it'll be 2 knights for 2 bishops. I don't have to take right away. I'm still considering this move h6, but I think that only helps white like improve the bishop, potentially drop back to g3. I still have this move at my disposal. Not sure if I actually want to play this. Like, if king here, then I feel like taking is kind of risky for black. And there's knight d5 that comes to mind. And that might allow queen e4, though. So I'm kind of leaning towards taking. I just want to simplify. Give white another weakness. And the king side is pretty solid here. I'm going to play queen d6, simply attacking the pawn. And now the c file is fully open, so there's some idea of rook c8. Still looking at this move, knight d5, queen e4, knight f6. I could start with rook c8. Of course, I don't want to take the pawn because bishop takes h7. There's also this move. I'm going to start with rook c8. I'm thinking very soon, if white allows, I'll play queen d5, which targets a lot of things in white's position. And d4 is still untakeable, but yeah, there's just a lot of potential things that could be hanging for white. So bishop d2, I mean, that's a good sign. White's retreating. I think I'll still go for queen d5. Might like to swing over to h5. I'm really just looking to like keep good control over the position, not give white any initiative on the king side. Knight does a nice job of making sure h7 is always defended. And one plan, yeah, white saves the a-pawn. I'm going to go for the plan of rook f d8, and then the idea is to maneuver the knight to g6. Okay, white's trying to be solid, but this is giving me time to further improve my pieces. Okay, bishop e4. So if I play this and white plays this, I think I just take and win a pawn. So yeah, let's swing the queen over. And I really like the prospect of bringing the knight to g6, because that will lead to ideas of knight f4, knight h4, and maybe eventually mating on g2. Yeah, white finally plays king h1. Maybe white should have played king h1 much earlier to try and use the g-file. Another benefit of having the knight here is now the g-file, it's hard to actually use for white. G7 is just blocked by the knight. Still gotta watch my time. Knight f4, queen e3. I mean, maybe I just take the bishop. The queen would have to take, and then I have this move, rook d5. Yeah. Like sometimes when the opponent has like really bad pawn structure, one strategy is just to simplify the position by trading minor pieces. And sometimes the more pieces that come off the board, the weaker the pawns become. And I really like the rook on d5. White puts a rook on g4. I think I'll just go ahead and double up, trying to exert maximum pressure against the pawn. I mean, there might be ideas of pawn e5 because there is a pin on the d file. But white doubles up on the g file. Yeah, it's still a question what my plan is. Like queen f5 looks playable. Queen f5. It's hard to actually exploit the king. Like I want to take and rook h5, but that doesn't really work. I do have to move a lot more quickly. So yeah, let's continue trying to simplify. Queen f5. If takes, we go into an endgame where black should definitely have the upper hand. And this move does enable h5. Now, if we see rook g5, I might have a decision to make. Because taking would fix white's structure a bit. Rook g5, yeah, probably end up going for queen takes g5. I would get two rooks for a queen. Might be hard to judge, though, because white invades with the queen in the end. And then can I orchestrate some mating idea, like get the knight to f3? Yeah, I don't want to play this because I think there's this tactic, rook takes g6. So I might just play this move. Just trying to make sure things don't get overly complicated. Taking was probably fine, and we can analyze that after the game. But given the time situation, I don't want to transform the position in such a way where I could lose control. I'm taking with the rook here, making sure the pawn's blockaded. This does leave my back rank potentially vulnerable, but okay, white can't access it. And even if white could, there's, okay, the knight can block, the rook can come back. And yeah, now I'm looking for like mating ideas. Like if I can swing the rook over, knight f4 in the air. Yeah, knight f4. There's also knight h4. I'm going to start with knight h4. This is a nice tempo move, hitting the rook. Also attacking the pawn. And then if rook g3, I can move the knight to f5. It again hits the rook and adds more pressure to d4. And probably what I'll end up doing, maybe even next move, is moving my h-pawn just to make sure that the back rank is not going to wind up getting me mated. Give some loot for the king. Yeah, probably just h6 here. And with rook h3, the rook is now kind of stuck on the edge of the board. As g3 is controlled. It can move to h5, but actually rook h5 walks into knight g3 with a discovered check fork. That would be cool. And now what we're seeing is black's pieces are really nicely placed. And white's pieces, I mean, this bishop is just stuck between its pawns. The rook is out of play and also stuck. And the queen can't really do anything to hurt me. So even though it's still equal material, I think positionally it's just really good for black. Now here, okay, I could win material with this. Knight g3. Anything better? Let's go for knight g3. And it's good that I made Luft for my king. Because if the pawn were still here, queen a8 would lead to mate. But thankfully I have king h7. If white wins this pawn, I win this pawn. There is pawn d5 attacks the queen, but it obstructs the queen from defending the pawn. So yeah, this is now crumbling for white. Rook f5 looks pretty good. Just making sure there's no counterplay. And I don't think there's any defense for white. I've fallen below a minute, but still should be plenty of time. As long as the queen can't checkmate me on g7, life should be good. And this pawn is useful on b5 because yeah, queen a6 does not defend f1. And that's game over. Got some nice animations up to 1913. Yeah, interesting game. I think that was a very instructive game. Some nice positional concepts stemming from the Alapin Sicilian. And yeah, I didn't have much time to explain like the nuances of this opening because my opponent was moving so quickly. But in general, the two main moves for black against Alapin are both revolved around attacking the pawn on e4. So d5 has been my choice for many years. There's also knight f6, which is totally playable, but leads to slightly different structures after e5 and knight d5, and usually white plays d4. But in the game, d5 takes, and this is basically an improved version of a Scandinavian because white's committed the pawn to c3, the knight can't develop to attack the queen. So very often the queen just stays on d5 for many moves. And most players will play d4 immediately here. And after knight f6, I probably would have gone for a very similar setup to what we saw in the game. Knight a3, I'm sure is playable. Definitely not the most common move, but it is an idea in the Alapin. And yeah, I think the play was pretty natural. Yeah, sometimes as black in these openings, you do just have to be patient and be solid and just accept the fact that white develops a little bit quicker. But yeah, I was still fine having a very solid position, was able to expand. And yeah, once we got here, I mean, I think black is already doing like quite well with the pieces set up that the way they are. Knight d7, as we saw, some very nice harmony. And yeah, the engine does approve of bishop takes f3. This is a nice tactic because if queen takes, then knight e5 actually just wins the piece. White can't really take to counterattack because I take the queen with check. And then, yeah, going forward from here, I think it was just very positional. And that's exactly what I wanted. I was able to blockade the pawn, improve my pieces, got my knight to g6, and yeah, we simplified a bit. I guess I should analyze this moment. If I had more time, I would have calculated a bit more deeply to take. But this wasn't so clear. Like, even though two rooks are generally preferable over a queen, especially in this case with white having damaged structure, I just didn't want to give white easy play. Like, sometimes it's just easier to play with the queen in such positions. And I wasn't quite sure how to coordinate my pieces here. Like, I was calculating this, which actually would have been a blunder because queen e7 hits both rooks, and yeah, my knight is loose as well. So yeah, probably good that I didn't go for that line. And yeah, what happened in the game, this led to a nice tactic. Yeah, knight g3 was a nice kind of icing on the cake to what was mostly a positional battle. So nice game to start the episode. Let's do another. Okay, next opponent, playing Luftful Ohad Hamov. Probably butchered that name. Rated 1909 from Uzbekistan. And we have what resembles a Grand Prix. This is actually called the McDonnell attack. And against this, of course, black can kind of play what maybe you normally play against a Grand Prix. But I think the most principal move here is pawn d5 right away. And this is a move I became aware of many years ago. And it's actually some sort of gambit, because the idea is not to take with the queen, but it's to play knight f6. And if white gets greedy and holds on to the pawn, which my opponent does, then as far as I know, the move to play here is e6. And black is gambiting a pawn. Yeah, I'll take back with bishop. So in return for being down a pawn, I have a bit more development, but white has also committed these pawns to f4 and c4. And the pawns can't move backwards, so there's going to be some weaknesses in white's position, mainly the d4 square and the backwards d-pawn. And that's probably been like about 10 years since I looked at this line. I remember I played this once over the board in a serious tournament. I was preparing this for an opponent who played it. But yeah, as far as I remember, like the play should be pretty natural for black. I am debating where to put this bishop, like e7, maybe a bit more solid, and wouldn't obstruct the d-file. But this move, the nice thing about this move is it hits f4, and I don't think white can get away with d4, because takes, and if takes, there's bishop b4 check, winning the queen in the end. So yeah, let's be a bit more active. A very aesthetic setup of the minor pieces. Pressure against both white's extended pawns. White plays d3. And now I could maybe put more pressure with queen c7. And then, yeah, this would provoke g3. I mean, one thing to understand about this position is black's compensation is more long-term. I'm not going to win back the pawn right away. I probably won't get any tactics right away either. But long term, like the positional benefits for black should compensate for the material deficit. Now here I'm looking at bishop h3, preventing white from castling. Might walk into knight g5. Calculating bishop h3, knight g5, bishop g2, rook g1. And then sadly, my bishop would be trapped. So I might just castle, allow white to castle. Like one plan here is just to get the rooks to the center. And then like the pieces are in very nice position. Beyond that, there's some idea, like once I get the rook to d8, there's ideas of bishop f5 and then trying to target this pawn. Like maybe even doubling up on the d-file, knight b4. I could have a lot of attackers against d3. So yeah, I'm going to start with rook to d8, see how white responds. There's already some like x-ray vision against the queen. Like I'm considering this move, but it doesn't quite work because takes, and don't think I have a good discovery. So I guess now it's a question. Do I want to play rook e8 and try and control the other open file, or do I want to consider doubling up? And bishop h3 is another option. Because rook f2, I trap the rook. But bishop h3, rook e1. And then rook e8. Like a3 doesn't really scare me. b4 I probably don't mind taking. So I'm really just looking for the resources for black here. Trying to see if there's any like tactical ideas. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything concrete. I was also considering knight d4, but takes, and I don't think I want my pawn fixed on d4. So let's just start with rook e8. I think it's hard to go wrong with this move, and I'm just putting the ball back in white's court. White plays knight c3. I think I'll just kind of play slowly with a6. White is setting up this. Another idea is bishop f8, which would unleash the rook and threaten bishop takes c4. Maybe that's trickier. The bishop's actually not serving much purpose here. I think this is actually more useful than a6. Yeah, because it's basically prophylaxis against knight b5. If knight b5, I just move back, and if I can draw arrows, and then probably eventually kick the knight. And I was threatening this, white spots the threat and sidesteps the queen. So now, I mean, bishop h3 is still an idea. Looking at like bishop h3, rook e1. And there's also bishop f5, which I mentioned as an idea earlier. I think I like bishop f5 more. Just aligning with the queen. Now I have two attackers against d3. There's only there are two defenders, so not quite threatening to win the pawn. I might be threatening to take on e2. Be interesting to calculate. Because if queen takes e2, I take the pawn and skewer, win back material. Rook takes e2. Now I don't think it works. Do I have knight d4? Knight d4... Like earlier, I didn't like the idea of my pawn getting fixed, but here it attacks the knight. And if knight b5, queen c6, a7's hanging. Maybe I'll just play a6 first. It does seem slow, but I'm not quite seeing what white wants to do next. Also got to move quicker. Burned a lot of time in this early stages of the game. But I'm basically setting up knight d4. White kind of plays slow too. So now, yeah, now I'll go for this. Because after takes, the b5 square is deprived for the knight. And, I mean, if knight here, I just win the knight. There's a pin on the c-file. Knight e4, I take and win back the pawn. The only safe squares are these squares, which are all pretty sad. And on top of that, I think one of my plans is queen c6 and bishop h3. Just looking to dive into g2. There's also b5 to consider. That would basically force knight b2. Trying to calculate, but probably have to rely on intuition here. Yeah, let's start with b5. Because once the knight goes back to b2, it's just so sad. Completely dominated. And I probably should start with this move. Because white wants to play this next. So this way I control the diagonal, I keep the pin on the c-file. And I'm likely setting up bishop h3. And it could be met with bishop f1. Rook f1. Okay, so bishop h3, rook f2, white wants to play. I mean, let's go for it. I mean, there's bishop f3 actually too. Yeah, maybe it's not so simple. I think I'll still go for this. Like if white counterattacks... Wow, there's almost this move. Does it work? Takes, rook e1, king f2, rook here, threatening knight g4 mate. But then there's g4. I don't think it works. I really want to sack the queen. There's this move too. I don't think that works either. Take, check. Wait a minute. Takes, check, king f2, rook f1. King e2 is forced, rook e8. bishop e3, and then I take the rook. If king d2, I take the bishop. I think that's good, actually. Oh no, my queen? I'm so low on time. I think I just go for it. Oh no, my queen. This might backfire. I didn't calculate this fully, but I think I looked at it just enough. Like, the pieces are really coordinating nicely for black. And white's pieces are just so clunky. Yeah, we see rook e3. So I'm not mating, but I think I just take. And if bishop takes, at the very least, I win the rook. I'm threatening rook f2. And material, like, isn't that bad for me. Okay, rook f2 wins the queen. It might be mating too somehow. Like king d1, I have bishop g4. What a cool sequence. There's also e2. I think I just start with bishop g4, driving the king away from its lady. I mean, queen e2 is a try, but then I'll have a nice snack on e2. Okay, 55 seconds to convert this position. This is probably the simplest, threatening mate in one. And now pawn e2. Yeah, it looks like it should be made in just a few more moves. I'll go ahead and queen. And giving the rook, and then rook e2 is checkmate. Okay, pretty cool game. Yeah, we'll definitely have to see a slow motion replay of that queen sacrifice sequence. But yeah, I was pretty happy with the position I got from the opening. It's one of these lines that I think a lot of players just don't study because f4 is quite rare. I mean, knight f3, knight c3, pawn c3 are all way more common. Even pawn d4 is more common than f4. But it's a good line to keep in mind, like if you play the Sicilian, because pawn d5, it just really tries to punish this opening as quickly as possible. And very often it's not good for white to overextend in the center like this, because then the bishop has a square. Even sometimes the knight can come to f5, and black will have some nice development. And as we saw in the game, white tried to hold on to the pawn, but after e6 takes. Yeah, I think this is, I mean, it's interesting. Engine actually gives zeros, so it says it's playable for both sides, but I think it's just a bit more pleasant for black. It's so hard for white to achieve this move d4, and going into the middle game, like even though black's down a pawn, the pieces just come into play very naturally. And yeah, I tried to be patient with just how I organize my pieces, and I gradually built up pressure. And then this move, knight d4, I mean, this was the first kind of aggressive move for me. And after takes, then yeah, I just kept improving, kept putting up the pressure. Found this move bishop h3, and I found queen takes f3, which actually turns out to be the top engine move. And yeah, my time was already low at this point, but thankfully I was able to just calculate this line and see that after rook e8, yeah, the king didn't really have any great options. Rook e3 was played in the game. If king d2, I was just going to take the rook, and white has all these problems with the queen and king being aligned on the second rank. Engine says the best move is knight d1, which I did not calculate this far. This would prevent rook f2, but it still looks really fun for black to play. Stockfish is pointing out the pretty nice looking move bishop f1, completely invading white's position and threatening rook e2 checkmate. And white just has no defense to this. I mean, bishop e2 avoids getting mated, but black is winning the queen and has just great position. d3 falls, and yeah, black's completely winning here. So, okay, yeah, pretty happy with that game. You know what? I think I might just end on that game. I know most speedrun episodes feature 3 games, but yeah, I think I just want to end on that one. So hope you guys enjoyed the content. This is a 2 game episode. If you have questions, do leave them below, and I'll see you guys soon.